It's Platt, and today we head to the Netherlands. That's next to Platt's Beer of the Week. So the particular beer we have today is Grolsch Pilsner. Comes to us from the fine folks at Grolsch Brewing. A little background into Grolsch Brewing. Grolsch is located in the Netherlands and is the second largest brewer in the Netherlands behind, obviously, Heineken. The brewery itself was founded in 1615 by a gentleman named Willem Neerveld. Hopefully I said that right, in Groenlo. Hopefully I'm saying these names right. This was kind of a tricky time in the Netherlands. They were just coming out of an 80-year-long war, but Willem thought this was the time and the place, and he started slowly growing the brewery. Eventually, he needed an apprentice brewer, and in 1615, he brought in a gentleman named Peter Kuiper to be his apprentice brewer. Now, Peter knew the key to success in the brewing industry, and that is marry the boss's daughter, which he did in 1676. In the fine tradition of Augie Busch and I believe Peter Best and a couple other brewers kind of came up through the ranks, becoming a son-in-law first. Now, however, though, Peter did provide something to Grolsch, which was very important. Peter, when working on formulations for beers, came up with a concept that was kind of new. And you have to remember, we're talking about the late 1600s, early 1700s. It wasn't that much further back in the past that people were brewing beer with something called Groot, which is kind of a variety of herbs and spices they would use to flavor beer. Eventually, hops, took over as far as the popular spicing of flavoring of beer. But there weren't a lot of techniques at the time. What Peter created was he was the first to use two different hop additions and use two different styles of hop. One for aroma, one for bitterness. Again, today that seems kind of commonplace, especially in the age of double IPAs, hazy IPAs with multiple hops additions and 3 or 4 different hops. But back then, that was kind of a breakthrough technique, and it really made the beer pop and really add a lot of flavor to the beer and kind of made Grolsch beer stick out. So Peter did provide something there. As far as the brewery itself, the brewery stayed in the family all the way up to 1895 when it was purchased by the de Groen family. They held on to the brewery for a little over a century or so, just like a lot of breweries start off in a family, but eventually gets bought out by a major conglomerate, and that's what happened in 2007 when the de Groens sold out to S.A.B. Miller. Now, S.A.B. Miller ran into a problem that the big conglomerates run into. You acquire a lot of breweries, and then a government official reminds you, well, hey, you own too many breweries in this jurisdiction or that jurisdiction, so they have to kind of roll them between each other. And eventually, S.A.B. Miller sold Grolsch to AB InBev, that eventually rolled that over in 2016 to Asahi in the same deal where Asahi bought Peroni. So another classic European brand that kind of got shuffled between the big boys. Interesting little story about Grolsch. They have 2 breweries there in the Netherlands. Their main brewery, however, was damaged in 2000s in a fireworks explosion. Apparently one of their neighbors was a fireworks manufacturer. They had an explosion, damaged the brewery to the point where it was not operational anymore. So they had to shift production to their sister brewery about 8 miles down the road. Now, they wanted to use the same source of water at the main brewery, so they ended up creating a pipeline to pipe the water from the main brewery to the new brewery to keep the same water they used in the production of Grolsch, which is kind of a cool little story. Real quick, let's talk about some of their other beers. Obviously, the Pilsner is by far the most popular. They also produce Grolsch Weizen, a 5.1% ABV Weizen beer. They claim, just reading about it, that it's a lighter-bodied Weizen than a traditional German Weizen beer. ABV, flavor profile the same, just a little lighter body. Next, there's Grolsch Radler. Radlers are, of course, real popular. Lighter, refreshing, sweeter, lower ABV beer. This is a 2% ABV, very session-style beer. They do add fructose syrup to the beer, so some people may or may not like that concept. And lastly, there's Grolsch Zero. That's their non-alcoholic brew, which now is kind of a new trend, the 0.0. You know, in the past, non-alcoholics were 0.5 or whatever, but now they're not a drop of alcohol in them. Grolsch also produces a separate line of beer called Amsterdam. And just my research, from what I gather, Amsterdam is a value beer, lower price point, similar to the Busch, Milwaukee Best thing. But they produce a line of strong lagers. They kind of specialize in strong lager beers. So it's kind of a hybrid between like maybe Milwaukee's Best and Steel Reserve. So the Amsterdam brand, maybe more something to European malt liquor or something like that. Before we try this particular beer, though, let's check out the stats. So today, I thought I would talk about this unique bottle that Grolsch Pilsner comes in. These swing top bottles have been around since about the 1850s. That's when they were invented. The impetus behind them was before then, if you wanted a bottled beer, you had to use cork, and if you were worried about the cork coming out or popping, then you had to put the carriage on there. One of the issues in dealing with cork, especially back then, there was no synthetic cork, it was natural cork. If you weren't careful, the cork could dry, could crack, could rot. You're kind of up in the air. You know, you're just going to have to realize that out of every X bottle, some of them were just going to go bad because of the cork. So the swing top was invented to kind of help solve that problem. And it became popular at the time, but then by the time the late 19-teens, early 1920s came around, the traditional crown top that we have today was invented. It was cheaper, easier to use. Grolsch kind of faced their moment in 1922 when they decided to just stick with this bottle instead of going to the new crown caps. They said, well, we'll eat the extra expense, just our people like it, it looks cool. And in a way, it's become their kind of almost logo, in a certain sense, is this bottle. So it's kind of cool that they've kept that. What you may not know, and I did not know until I started researching, was that Grolsch actually makes these bottles in different colors for different beers they've introduced for the years. The traditional green, of course, but they also have yellow, brown, and red for, again, different beers they've had over the years. You can actually find used empty Grolsch bottles online on like eBay and stuff, and they're kind of a collector's item. A, they just kind of look cool, but B, and what most people really like these for, is home brewing. And that's how I kind of got introduced to Grolsch 20-something years ago when I started home brewing. They just make your life a little easier. My first kit, like I've told you guys, was a Mr. Beer home kit. They came with the plastic bottles, but if you want to get into glass or whatever, and again, back then there weren't as many homebrew shops, finding caps, finding the capper, going through the whole process, kind of a pain in the backside, where these are reusable and all I had to do was drink beer to get them. So I remember starting, there were certain convenience stores near the house that always had these, so I'd always grab one or two, you know, and keep the bottles, and that's when I first started homebrewing, was using these, and these are great for that, and there's several reasons for that. These are a little bigger than the 12-ounce bottles, and a lot of the carbonation caps that you get are for 16-ounce bottles, so they work for that, not necessarily 12. Also, too, these are dishwasher safe, so you can throw them in the dishwasher clean, make your life easier. Again, you're not having to buy more caps or needing a capper. It cuts you out of that initial expense. One thing I do advise if you're going to use with home brewing, this little rubber grommet here, you're going to want to clean underneath that, even though you may think, well, nothing gets in there, whatever. You'll be surprised where bacteria gets. So you'll want to either take it off before you throw it in the dishwasher, or you want to hand wash that separately, but make sure you get underneath that so there's no gunk built up there. Well, with that being said, let's drink some Grolsch. Whee! Feels like a party. I could tell you right now, I haven't even put my nose in, but you can get that classic hot bite of a Pilsner. I can also smell that kind of European green bottle funk that comes from just the light exposure you know, these green bottles. That's why you kind of get that, you know, again, Heineken's kind of known for that funk. I can already smell it without even tasting it. Oh, yeah, that just kind of wafts over your nose. Let's give it a try. Oh, it's a nice beer. It's just a nice, refreshing beer. Actually, the skunk's more on the nose and necessarily comes off in the mouth. Hits you a little in the aftertaste. I don't know if you noticed or not, and I didn't pour aggressively, but not much head there as far as head retention. That head went away fast, but plenty of effervescence. Yeah, this is classic European lager. Again, I caught hops on the nose. I don't get quite the hop bite either compared to classic Pilsner. I got it on the nose, but I didn't get it necessarily in the finish. This actually, mouth-wise, body-wise, kind of comes off more of the classic European lager. You get more like a Heineken kind of thing than some of those classic German Pilsners that are a little more crisp, a little more bite to them. This mouth feel has a little more body to it. But still, just a very drinkable beer, very easy going. And again, if I ever had to rebuild my bottle inventory, well, I'd kill a ton of these. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or beers that you'd like me to try, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.